But I, as a director, I would always show me the gun. I would get the gun from the armorer. I would take the actor aside in public. I would take everybody aside. I said, hold on, safety meeting, safety meeting. I would
Mhm.
open the gun. I would make sure the gun was clear and empty. I would dry fire the gun six times. If it was a semi-automatic, I would do the same thing. I'd say, clean gun on set. If you have a real gun that you're going to use on set with blanks, I'd say hot gun on set. You
Okay.
always notify everyone there. You just take your time when there's a weapon like that because something can happen.
I have to tell you that I read your book cover to cover,
Oh, thank you.
and this was really intimidating because usually when I do an interview, somebody's either promoting one thing or they have like a couple of things going on, but there was so much in your book that I didn't know. I almost had to get like a whiteboard out because I didn't know where to begin. I'm like, there's so many movies, there's so many TV
Oh
shows.
my God, I know. Well, it's 6.5 decades. I rounded up, but it's 6.5. I mean, and fortunately for me, I started when I was 12. So I had a lot of room to make some mistakes. So it was, and I made them all.
Yeah. So you chose Damn Glad to Meet You, which is a famous line from Animal House as the book title.
Yeah.
Why that line?
It's sort of recognizable to
Mm.
much of the audience. I mean, I get that a lot when people are Animal House fans. And I also wanted Rick Marowitz, who did the cover and did the Animal House poster, I kind of wanted it to be a lighthearted kind of cover, not just sort of a picture of me and how oftentimes they're done. And not
Yeah.
that that's wrong. I just wanted to set a tone of really
Okay.
what it was a lot like. It was going to be kind of fun. It's going to be, um, and and that was what I was going for, so that the audience, would know, oh, okay, so it's not going to be, well, I was 2 and then I was 3, and I just didn't want to do that kind of literal thing because
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
nothing. It just didn't fit my template, I didn't think.
Okay. And looking back now, because in the book there's an ongoing theme where you are one of the most successful, steadily working actors, right? But you're having this series of like near misses. Oh my God, I should have taken that part, or I wish I got that part. When you look back now, who do you think has the better deal, the working actor or the movie star?
That's a really interesting question because you always sort of second guess yourself. Oh gosh, if I'd only done this, if I don't, if I had done one thing, then I wouldn't have been able to, probably wouldn't have directed as much as I did, which I deeply and
Right.
passionately
Yeah.
adore. And you wouldn't have met the people you met, so there was a point in my life when I was sort of in Hollywood before I moved to Santa Barbara that I was just plagued with all these doubts about, did I do this right? And you're almost frozen, at least for me,
Mm.
and you're constantly second guessing yourself and constantly wishing, oh, I wish I was at that table, or I wish I could be this guy. Why didn't that happen? And moving away from Hollywood helped me focus on my family and not so much on myself.
Right.
And that's a valuable lesson.
Yeah.
And some people can do it right here in Hollywood, and some people, and I had my taste of all those things. There was the string of movies that I did following Animal House that worked more or less, or more to it, didn't work, and so I couldn't stay in that category. If you don't make hit movies, you don't stay in movies.
Well,
So
what everybody talks about the pressure of once you're there. So there's the need to make it, quote unquote, right? Then you're in this big hit movie that everybody's talking about, and now people talk about the pressure to stay there. Describe that if you would.
well, that was sort of the thing that got me second guessing. Is this the right thing? Should I do this? Should I not do this? I mean, and then the one moment, I guess, like when I had gone back to television and I did this series called Tucker's Witch, and it was grueling. I mean, working, we did, I don't know, 15 episodes, 13 episodes, and I was working every day, 14 hours a day, go home, you study your script for the next day, and working with Catherine Hicks, who's lovely. And when I got done, then I was offered another job like that, and I just said, God, I just need a break. I
Yeah.
just need to take a break. And that, so I turned down moonlighting. You know, so I mean,
That got me. That was just like,
you know, and you kick yourself for that. And I was
yeah,
embarrassed about that for a while. And then it's just that's the roll of the dice. You know, it's like a poker game. You get certain hands, you get cards. Sometimes you bluff, sometimes you don't.
yeah,
It's just the way it was meant to be. And I've been very lucky and fortunate in the career that I've had, and I'm terribly satisfied with it. And there are those moments where you go, I shoulda, coulda, woulda, but
right.
you know, or ifs and ands and Peter Pans, as Kurt Russell says.
Yeah.
You know, it is because, but everybody's got them. I mean, you start reading about these big stars, they turned this down, they turned that down, that didn't happen, and this didn't happen.
Hmm.
And it's part of the game. It's part of like it's a very, you know, showbiz is a full contact sport, and
But
it's
you don't have protective gear like you do in
that's for
contact
sure.
sports.
And you take some hits, and sometimes you get up at the right time and you get a hit, or you don't get a hit, you know. And then it really the lesson for me was how do you recover? You know, what was it Mike Tyson who said, you know, you go into the fight with this brilliant plan, and then all of a sudden you're knocked on your ass. Now that plan's out the window.
Plans
Now
out
what?
the
Now
window.
what do you do? What's
Yeah.
plan B? So I mean, to me, that's the lesson I think I learned, you know, from all those ups and downs and around the corners um, and, and you look back and it's pretty funny, you know. I mean,
Yeah. Well, life is funny when you look back.
oh my gosh.
Yeah, and you need a sense of humor to get through life. For which brings me to my segue. So you worked with John Belushi and Chevy Chase, two of the most iconic stars from SNL, from season one of SNL, that you got to work with John in Animal House, you got to work with Chevy Chase and Fletch.
Mhm.
So tell me what it was like to be right there, front row center, sparring, doing dialogue with these comic geniuses, because you're not a comedian. You've done comedy, you've done drama. So what was that like for you?
Well, Animal House was my first comedy. I mean, I'd done sort of, you know, lighter stuff, but that was my first comedy. And fortunately for me, we were directed to play it real. You know, it was real. Let these are real characters. And John Landis, the director, wanted Belushi surrounded by real actors rather than an SNL sketch. And
Mhm.
you know, Chevy was originally wanted for Otter, and Landis didn't really want Chevy. He didn't want to do an SNL movie.
Mhm.
So he wanted just real actors around John Belushi and let Belushi, he called him sort of Harpo Marx meets the Cookie Monster. You know, that's what that Bluto character was.
Right.
And so but Belushi was so supportive and generous and gracious to me as a fledgling comedic actor that he'd always, you know, after a take, I'd say, "Was that all right?" You know, and he'd go, "Yeah, so, you know," or he was very supportive because as an improv actor, it's always whatever the reality is that you're presented with in a scene, you go with it.
Yes.
Yes, and you know, look at that wall, man. How are we going to get over that? You know, I mean, so it's like those are the things that, and he embraced us, and he embraced me, and I got to be a pretty good friend of his. He was a good friend of mine for many years after that, and not long enough, but
Yeah.
he, you know, and he was the biggest star in the world. He was in the number one TV show, the number one movie after Animal House came out, and he had the number one album with I think Briefcase Full of Blues and with the Blues Brothers. I mean, I don't know how anybody could survive that, and everybody thought they wanted to party. They thought he was Bluto. They thought he was that crazy guy on Saturday Night Live. So there was no off time for him. And they were constantly wanting to party and drugs and alcohol, whatever, with him. And I saw a big change between Animal House and when we worked together again on 1941, the Steven Spielberg movie. It had taken a toll, because he became more and more isolated from just the day-to-day things that people in a more normal life have. And
Right.
that wasn't for him anymore. So
Is that, what is it that, because I know that you had your own journey with being introduced to drugs and experimenting and then getting sober and everything. What is it about the entertainment industry that lures people into substance abuse?
well,
Especially, when they're very successful. I mean, yeah, what is
no,
it that you know that I don't know that you can enlighten me?
actors have always been known to be drunks. I mean, you look at the British theater, look at Peter O'Toole and Richard Harris, and I mean, I have heard stories of the binges that those guys went on, and Richard Burton and those famous great theater actors. So it's been part of actors' history forever. And
Right.
then I think the thing for us that happened during the 70s and 80s was music through Saturday Night Live and especially for John Belushi and the SNL people, music, they played a little rougher. They played with harder drugs, than say actors did. And that sort of it got infused. And then everybody in the 70s and 80s, mostly the 80s, were they, cocaine, it wasn't bad for you. Oh my God, I can't believe this is not harmful to me. And I mean, it was like, oh, this is okay.
Who said, like, where was it sort of like back in the day when they said cigarettes weren't bad for you? I'm trying to
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah, it was like that. I mean, it was like, there was nothing printed on a package, a little vial of cocaine that said, "Oh, do not do this. This is bad," And it was like, and you just didn't want to acknowledge the reality of it. And so it was one of those things that it just was accepted. It's okay. And it's not, I'm only doing a little bit, and no, it's not going to be. Uh,
Yeah.
and I just knew for me, even when I was was using, I didn't do very much. I would only maybe just a look, once or twice a week. But the thing was, how often did I think about it? It was one of those things about, oh, I'm working. No, I can't do it now. I'll wait. It's the fact that you're thinking about it that's the addictive part. And whether you're using or not using, that made me aware that I had a problem. And it wasn't a question of how much I did, it was a question of how much I thought about it. And
Right.
taking your eye off the ball, And I think it's also, I noticed when I toured with the Beach Boys when I was promoting Almost Summer, a movie I did, that there's a high that happens to musicians when they perform in front of an audience. And it's just such an elation. It's so amazing. And I think drugs sort of allow that to go on after the show's over,
Interesting.
So maybe I could see that. I could see why musicians are sort of attracted to that life, and it's
Yeah.
tragic.
Interesting. And there was a moment in the book that made me laugh when your agent heard that casting directors were asking for a Tim Matheson type. And your agent called someone and said, "Well, I actually have Tim Matheson." And no, that's okay. We just want a Tim Matheson type.
It's sort of, having worked with Kurt Russell and what Kurt gave me as a friend and as a partner in a show we did together, The Quest in 1976 and 7, was it's very much like sports. And you you have a team and you get together and you do these things together, and you need that kind of mentality of an athlete, the ups and downs of it all to survive,
Yeah.
and that was one of the great lessons I learned from Kurt, is don't take it or yourself too seriously. just, roll with it. If it's good news, that's great. If it's bad news, well, that's great. Okay. Moving on, moving
Yeah.
on. And it helps steel me, I think, for the rigors of the industry.
Yeah, sure. And I have to tell you, by the way, I grew up in a house where my father was, I think he's your age. He's 75, around your
Mhm.
age.
Yeah, I'm 76, yeah.
Okay, obsessed with Westerns, particularly Gunsmoke and Bonanza. So I had a
Okay.
lot of fun reading that part of the book.
It
Uh,
was it was so great. I mean,
yeah.
it was a period of time in Hollywood where every studio lot had a Western town.
Hmm.
6, 8 blocks on the back lot where you could ride around the carriages and saloons, and they were every single one had Paramount had one, Universal had one, Warner Brothers Universal still has a little bitty one. I mean, for the tour, I think they keep it, because Westerns really aren't that they are, but they're shot on location more now. But
Right.
yeah, it was a generational thing, and I think early TV we did a lot of that. Have Gun Will Travel and Wanted Dead or Alive. I mean, all the young stars of that era.
Americana, it was, yeah. Actually, there's a question that just occurred to me. Um, I'm assuming since you did a lot of work in Westerns, you worked with a lot of armorers. I mean, I'm sure they had professional armorers back
Oh
then,
God, yeah. Oh
same
God, yeah.
protocol as they have now. Did you ever experience a live round in a gun or any type of live ammunition or any type of missteps in working with any armorers when you were working in the Western genre at all? Or was everything like
Never,
airtight?
never. I wore a gun. I was 18, 19 when I started the Virginia, and for the next 4 or 5 years, I wore a gun every day.
Mhm.
On Virginian or on the Western pilots I did, and then on Bonanza, and then on the Quest. Um, whether it was more rigorous then, or I would always check my own weapon. I would always
Okay,
make sure when someone handed me a weapon, I would check to see if it was empty, make sure it was empty. I would dry fire it 6 times to make sure there was nothing in it. So even if there was something I missed, pointed at the ground, I'd click, 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 and make sure. And so I was trained, never ever was there an accident on the set. However, there was a time, I believe a young actor on Alias Smith and Jones died because he pointed a gun at his head. It had a blank in it, and a blank is still explosive powder. It just doesn't have a bullet on the end of it. It doesn't have a
okay,
lead bullet. So even, but you never pointed a gun at anyone. And if I
okay,
had to rehearse pointing a gun at a camera, I would use my hand. I would never point a real gun at anyone. And, evidently those lessons didn't translate to that set that where that accident happened. And
right.
it just sounds, and there's that whole thing in Hollywood or in movies that people rush, rush, rush. Come on, we gotta go, we gotta go, we gotta go. Let's go. Oh, forget that. And it sounded like there was a lot of that going on. Um, but as a director, I would always show me the gun. I would get the gun from the armorer. I would take the actor aside in public. I would take everybody aside. I said, hold on, safety meeting, safety meeting. I would
Mhm.
open the gun. I would make sure the gun was clear and empty. I would dry fire the gun six times. If it was a semi-automatic, I would do the same thing. I'd say, clean gun on set. If you have a real gun that you're going to use on set with blanks, I'd say hot gun on set. You
Okay,
always notify everyone there. You just take your time when there's a weapon like that, because something can happen. And obviously something I'd never imagine why a real round of ammunition would ever be within a mile of a set. I have no idea how that happened. That's just insane.
now you're a wealth of information. Did you learn all of this from armorers that you worked with over the years?
Sure. Yeah, they were good. I mean, there was a system of taking care of weapons and dispensing weapons to protect everyone. So when a gun was handed to me, it was cleared, and I put my gun on, and yeah, and they were trained in Westerns how to behave and comport yourself, and to have safety.
Okay,
And there was no excuse for that kind of a mistake.
right. And with directing, so I have to ask this, you directed an episode of Suits? Okay, you know what I'm gonna ask.
Oh, Meghan Markle. Oh, she was great. She was so great. She was, I mean, she was a lovely actress and a woman. I didn't get to know her very well. I mean, because as a director, you just, you know, there's 100 million things you're doing, and she was always prepared,
Mhm.
very, very good on set, very cordial and nice to everyone. And as all of the actors on that set were. And so it was really a treat. As I recall, she was engaged to someone at the time, not Prince Harry. Uh,
Right.
and but she was just lovely. She was lovely. We all went out to, I think, lunch one time. We were just sort of to get to know you. You know, here's the new director, and hey, come on, let's sit down and talk. And let any ideas you got, anything. I'm always open. Let's, you know. So I just wanted to. I'm there as a coach, basically. They know how to do the show. I'm there to help them be their best, and that I just want to put the camera in the right spot to favor them. I want to, as they say, protect the portraiture of the performer to make them look as good as they can look. And,
Right.
you know, find the right angle, and oh, that angle's not good
Wish
for
I
her.
had someone like you doing this for me.
You don't need any help at all. You look fantastic.
Thank you. So how many episodes of Suits did you direct, or was it just one episode?
I did just one episode. I had done the pilot of Covert Affairs,
Mhm.
the same company that did Suits. And Suits came second. And so after I did the pilot, they asked me if I would do an episode. And I said, sure. And at that time, there weren't as many acting opportunities for me at that moment. So I wanted to get into pilots, and I wanted to sort of maybe step into movies, and and in that at that period, that's where I was aiming. I was doing a lot of TV movies, and when they sort of went away, I did more episodic.
Okay. So basically the directing, the acting lulls were kind of a blessing in disguise because it opened a whole other aspect of your career. What would you say is the biggest spiritual lesson you've learned from your career?
Wow, that's deep. You know, it's family. It's a family. When you're on a set, the 100 people that are together for that group of that union to put that show together as a family. When I was a younger actor and I started studying acting, I became very selfish about it's my work. I'm here to do my work. And if you get in the way of me doing my work, I would get very upset. I got very annoyed at crew members, come on, this thing is supposed to, why I want this here. This should have been here. You should have done this, blah, blah, because I wanted everything to be perfect. And
Mhm.
I expected that from me, and I expected and demanded that from everyone else. And I found that during, as an actor and as a director, that that was not the way to be, and I learned over time that the best way to is just to embrace everyone for their skills and their limitations. Not everyone is as devoted and dedicated as or as good at their job as one would like, but it's a
Mhm.
family, and they're doing the best they can.
Yeah.
And it's not a big deal. Something happens, oh, the prop's not right. Don't worry, guys, come on, we'll do it again. I mean, that's why there's take two. So I think the biggest lesson I got was don't sweat the small stuff. Embrace the humanity. And hopefully that will infuse the film and the project you're working on with what an audience can take away as love, is that there's something special about
Right.
this episode or this show, and sometimes it comes through, sometimes it doesn't. But, you know, I just stopped being so demanding and dictatorial and just started embracing the process. And okay. And it
Yeah.
served me better. And it also let my blood pressure go lower too.
Yes. So you played the vice president on the West Wing for several seasons. We are in the midst of probably the most polarizing presidential election of our time. From working on that set, and I'm sure that you worked with, I'm sure there were a lot of political insider consultants buzzing around all the time, and you kind of learned the culture of Washington. Knowing what you know and kind of being in the shoes of that character, how are you sort of processing what's going on in our country right now with the election like 2 weeks away?
Well, it's interesting. I find, I was in the United States Marine Corps Reserves during
Mhm.
Vietnam, and I was anti-war. I didn't believe in the war. And yet, a part of me, I'm what, 18 years old, 18 and a half, a part of me knew and felt that I owe my country a great deal. And I owe my country a service. And I was draftable, and so I joined the Marine Corps Reserves, which meant that I served 6 months active duty and then I went back to my reserve unit in Los Angeles. And it was the greatest lesson of my life. It made a stronger person and man of me. It taught me how to lead and share hardships with my partner, my buddies, my fellow Marines, and to respect and honor the sacrifices that were made in Vietnam by over 50,000 Americans that lost their lives and hundreds of thousands of Americans that were injured, even for a cause that I didn't believe in, and I think, looking back, many people believed in. But I do believe that service is something that we lack now. There's no draft. There's no commitment to our country that every American must make. And I just feel that there was the greatest generation of World War I and World War II and Korea and Vietnam, where men and women served their country, risked their lives in many cases,
Mhm.
devoted years of their life to service to their country. And I think that's a lesson that has been forgotten because there's been, what, 20, 30 years now where nobody's in the service. We go to a baseball game or football game, we stand up and applaud. Oh, there's a service member of the day here who's, we're honoring them. That's sort of taken the place of our own personal service. And I think that something has been lost because of that. And I think that's opened a chasm where something like January 6th could occur, where someone speaks so dismissively and erroneously about the government and about what it's doing, and this is bad and that, and then people believe that. And I think that we owe it to ourselves to reflect and look back and recreate a public service, whether it's 1 year or 2 years, whether it's Peace Corps, whether it's, you know, uh, military service, or whether it's school service, or some kind of debt we owe to our country. I think, and I personally feel very strongly that it's a good thing that a lot of people that are running for election have served, because then they understand, they understand better in some cases, and as some people don't.
You make a good point.
Thank you.
And in talking about, you spoke about your working relationship with Martin Sheen on The West Wing. You described the relationship as kind of just lukewarm and polite. How come did you just not click, or was there just no opportunity to spend a significant amount of time together?
I think it was just that. I mean, Martin was busy, busy, busy. And
Mhm.
I would pop in and out for, parts of certain episodes. I was like in 6, 7, 8 episodes a year, So I was a guest actor that popped in and out. My closest relationship, I guess, was John in the show. And also I think Martin is, he's kind of a method actor in a way. I mean, I was kept at arm's length from him as the president. He did not care for me that much as vice president, and we were sort of, you know, not enemies, but we wanted the same thing, and I wanted it for me, you know.
Right.
I was the man who should have been president. He lucked out. And I
So are
think
you saying that on the set you were kind of it was meant to sort of be kept that way so that it translated onto the screen?
I think so. I think so. And because the nature of the scenes we always had, we were sort of in conflict.
Hmm.
And I think that did carry over. And my personal relationship with John Spencer, I think, was created by an episode where I discovered he was an alcoholic. He came to me and I confided in him that I, as the vice president, was also a former alcoholic or an alcoholic. And we had a meeting, and it was a private meeting that no one knew about. And I invited him to come to. And he shared personal stories with me about his drinking, and I talked to him about my drinking, and we opened up to each other. And it was the one chance, I think, on that show that I really had an opportunity to really bond with a member of the cast. I mean, I was close with Brad Whitford and Allison Janney, but they had so much to do, and I would just come in and out, you know. So I was just sort of like one of the many guest actors on the show. And I knew Rob, and I loved working with Rob, you know, and but you had your hands full when you were a regular on that show. I mean, Allison Janney and come in on her day off and go and drill those press conferences where she had every line of dialogue that would go on for 5 minutes. And Richard Schiff would do the same thing. And they, you know, because there was such a high standard of performance on that show that no one would dare, you know, not be prepared.
Wow. Okay. So it's sort of like there was no acting on that show, there was only being.
Yes, I totally agree. You
Yeah.
came on set in character. You really
Okay.
did. You did, you know, and there was it was a very high standard set for everybody. And I was always, you know, nervous when I came on there because they would nitpick. I think one time I was told in a speech I was giving by this second script. There were two script supervisors on that show, which wasn't it was uncommon. It only had there's only one script supervisor who says, "Oh, you know, you drank the drink on this line, and you got out of the chair on that line, and oh, and you said this instead of that." On Aaron's show, there was a person who had continuity, and then there was a person who had dialogue.
Mhm.
And at one point, the dialogue script supervisor said to me, "It's a semicolon, not a period." And I went, "Okay." That means it's not a full stop. It's sort of going on, and
Right.
go on and finish, you know?
Yeah.
I said, "Okay."
So it's not loosey goosey. Wow. And I actually I always thought that a script was just sort of a suggestion.
Never for Aaron. No, no. I mean, the funniest one for me was I had a very long speech. I was giving it to a bunch of reporters. And in the middle of the speech, and in one of the early rehearsals, the blocking rehearsal, I just wanted to try something. And because I was saying a bunch of stuff, and I went, and then I turned to another reporter and I added the and turned to the other reporter and finished the line. And I don't know, I just wanted to see how does that work? I mean, instead of just saying the dialogue to just everybody like I'm saying it all. And as I walked away from the rehearsal towards the dressing room, Aaron came on the set and I didn't know, but they were broadcasting the camera back to his office with sound and everything.
Hmm.
And he said, "Tim," I said, "Hey, Aaron." And he goes, "Keep the that was good."
Okay.
Hey, it's like God sees everything, you know, and
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
he's one of the greatest writers I've ever worked with.
That's
He's
what I hear from people.
unbelievable. And there was a kind of rhythm, almost a rhythm like from a Howard Hawks movie back in the 40s, like His Girl Friday, between Cary Grant and you know and Rosalind Russell, Catherine Hepburn and Cary Grant and Bringing Up Baby, just bum 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 bum, and there was a rhythm to it. So you really had to know your dialogue, and you had to know, and you had to prepare it. You had to rehearse it and prepare it so that you could come in and just be that quick. You can't stop and wonder, "Oh, gee, what's my line?" in the
Right.
middle of something like that and perform at that level. So when you came on that show, it was, I'd been rehearsing all, once the second I got the script, I started rehearsing it.
Sure. And tell me if you can relate to this. I have this thing that I've always done in my life where if I don't like something that I have to do, like in my past, let's say I had a job when I was younger that I didn't like very much, or I'm in a situation or I have to go somewhere I really don't want to go. In my mind, I say to myself, well, pretend you're just playing a role. Pretend this is just like a part that you're acting. And then it becomes fun. I don't,
Yeah.
can, does anybody else do that? Or is it just me?
I think, it's very interesting you should say that. I think people do it without realizing they're doing it.
Right.
And it's, and I think what you're saying is key to what's so wonderful about being an actor is that you get to stop being you for a second.
Right.
It's like, oh, I'd be angry if I had, and so I did an episode of Live from the Improv, and I was the host. This was, I don't know, 30 years ago or something. And I'm not a comic. I don't tell jokes. I don't feel comfortable in the MC role. And I created a character that was Tim Matheson
Mhm.
as a comic actor who was emceeing this show, and I had a couple of jokes they gave me and this stuff, and I felt comfortable in that character. It
Right.
wasn't me, but and it's like the audience doesn't know that I'm not a comic actor. They don't know that I'm not a jokester and I can't tell a joke or don't tell jokes.
Mhm.
So okay, then I'll just pretend I do,
Right. Exactly.
and I got away with it.
Exactly. That to me is, I tell my son that all the time. Act like you can do it. Act like you
That's
can.
great advice. I love that. That's great
Yeah,
advice because if otherwise you're telling yourself you can't do it.
exactly. You're playing one role or another, right?
Yeah, and that voice inside of you is saying, "Oh God, I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't do this." Why don't I just say, "Oh yes, I can. I can do this." If what if I was the guy that could do this? I can do this.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's wonderful.
If you could travel back in time and change any famous historical event, where would you go and what would you attempt to change?
Wow. Um, well, let me think. Historical event. I would say, well, the Civil War comes to mind.
Mhm.
Lincoln's assassination certainly comes to mind. But anything that could have prevented the Civil War or Adolf Hitler, anything that could have prevented that disastrous human being from gaining power would be the thing because it's so amazing what the effect one man had on the world by being so evil and so corrupt and just so venal and that I think would be the one thing I would see, I would seek to alter.
Okay. And what do you think you've mastered in this life, and what remains a work in progress for you?
I'm grateful. I've learned to be so grateful for all of the gifts that I've been allowed to be involved in and the performances I've been allowed to give. And I find that that just makes me and then I'm still doing what I loved doing as a kid. The gift I found was at 12 years old, a path through life
Mhm.
that I'm still on and still enjoying and still fortunately able to do and being given opportunities to do. And I think the other thing the biggest lesson I got, I think, was I was working with Lucille Ball, and I had done this movie Years, Mine, and Hours with her, and I learned a tremendous amount, from this tremendously talented comedian and giant famous television star, and the first woman to run a studio in Hollywood that no one ever acknowledges. And we were backstage on Here's Lucy. I was doing a guest shot on her show. She invited me after Years, Mine, and Hours, come and do this show. And I was very shy and timid, and and I'm back, and she was always saying, speak up, tell him to speak up, tell Tim to speak up. I can't hear him, because she performed from vaudeville, and so and she was tough. And Gail Gordon, who was a co-star on the show and from Our Miss Brooks, and he was, a famous comic actor, he came up to me and he said, "Hey, Tim, don't worry about that's Lucy. She was yelling at Richard Burton last week when he and Liz were here to speak up. So don't take it to heart." But we were backstage, Gail and I and Lucy, and the great thing about Lucy was if she would always have certain friends from vaudeville and back in the old days who maybe weren't working as much, and they needed a job, or they needed a job to get their insurance, their health insurance with the guild. So she'd give them a job. And we were all backstage, and this one woman had Lucy'd hired and had one line, and she was making her entrance from where we were. She went through a door out back in front of the audience, and she had one line. And Lucy, just before she made her entrance, Lucy looked at us and said, $20, she blows her line. And I was like, oh my God, that's horrible that she said that.
Yeah.
Woman looked at Lucy and winked, walked out, hit the line, came back in, stuck her hand out to Lucy. And I realized that I was so hypersensitive and shy. But Lucy was basically teaching the lesson that this is a full contact sport. This is like athletes. Athletes are that way with each other.
Yes.
Baseball players, they say the worst, horrible things to each other because
Yes.
you have to have the mettle to withstand all of the abuse and the good days and bad days and the good press and bad press that you're going to get every minute of every day. And I think that
Right.
was the lesson Lucy taught me, and I fortunately eventually got it landed.
Makes sense. And how do you define God and spirituality in your life?
It's a peaceful feeling that I trust, and I'm not overtly religious, probably a little more Eastern than Western, and partly because I think the one time I did go to Sunday school that my aunt and uncle, when I lived with my aunt and uncle for a year in the sixth grade, there was an attempted molestation by the Sunday school teacher. So that was it for me in church. As that, okay, I'm done. I'm done with that. I did not feel protected there. I feel more protected on a movie set. I was never ever approached or anything improper happened to me. I was lucky. I know it
Right.
has to many people, but
Right.
I was fortunate enough never to have had anything happen to me. But I think there's just a feeling of it's love. I think it's love, that really spirituality is forgiveness and love. And that sort of brings me back to that point in my life where I stopped being so demanding and critical and demanding discipline, and it's for myself and everybody else. It's just like forgive, just forgive. People are doing the best they can. They're the best version of themselves we can get, and I am too. So you know what? So you trip every now and then.
Right. And this is a question I ask everybody. What do you think you came into this lifetime as Tim Matheson to learn? And what do you think you came here to teach?
Ah, I think what I came to learn was how to share through performance humanity with other people, perhaps,
Okay.
make them laugh, make them cry, or bring together. We're all in we're all in this together, and we're all really the same thing. Um, and to teach, I think, and one of the reasons I was called to write this book was my grandmother, Sadie Embry Lewis, spent a great deal of time with the last year or two of her life with living with us because she was ill, and she was born in 1886, I think. They had in her family a couple that worked there and were caretaking, I mean, that cleaned the house and helped them. They were slaves to her parents. and I never talked to her enough about it. But she did teach me about civil rights and the way of the South during the 50s, and would make me watch TV. And I just wanted, I wanted to know more, and I wish I'd asked more. And I'm fortunate enough to have worked with certain people where I learned certain lessons that are gone now. People like Lucy and Jackie Gleason, Henry Fonda, and Bob Hope, who were vaudevillians. What are the lessons from that period that can be passed on and help younger actors today? And also, all the same is true as a director too, that just the way we used to do things and the way we do things now, there's no difference, and
Mhm.
we need to learn from the way things used to be. If you don't learn the lessons of the past, you're forced to repeat the
Repeat
mistakes.
them. Yeah.
And so I think that's the lesson that I want to do, is just sort of hand off that information and pass that information on to a new generation, and let them know that they don't have to reinvent everything. I mean, it's just that it's there if you look for it and you can find it and study it, and yeah, and you come and then Quentin Tarantino can just spin it on its head, and that's great, but he knows all the classics, and he
Right.
knows all of the history of the movies. You have to know the rules before you can break them.
Absolutely. And lastly, so you're on the Netflix train right now, like a lot of actors are with Virgin River, right? That successful Netflix train. What season are you guys on at this point?
We're announcing today, we're on season 6 premieres December 19th, and season 7 we've been renewed for season 7. It's been announced this
Oh,
morning.
okay.
It's the first time I've said this on to anyone. And so we started in March, I think, shooting season 7 of a show that we had no idea would be as successful and as revered as it is. And we're so happy and so grateful and pleased that we have a tremendous audience that loves the show, and we love doing it, and have a great family up in British Columbia where we shoot to simulate Northern California. And it's a treat. It's also it's sort of a different part of my career for the last, I don't know, 7 years, and 5 years before that on Heart of Dixie. I've been playing an older doctor. And,
Right.
so starting as a 12-year-old, there's been various phases of my career. That's why I wanted to share this, which tells each decade and each
Yeah. It really
transition.
does. From being on Leave It to Beaver as a little kid up to now Virgin River as the old doctor. It's like,
Right.
and
You
everything in
know,
between. Yeah.
yeah. And it's listen, when I remember doing that Lucy show, Lucille Ball went, she blew her line when I made it. I come on stage in the middle of a scene, and Lucy had this look on her eyes that she was just nervous and distracted, and she blew a line. And then we started the scene over, and I thought, oh my God, Lucille Ball, she's been doing this for 50, 60 years, and she still gets nervous.
Mm,
It calmed me down immediately. And so
yeah.
I don't punish myself and say, oh, I'm a bad actor if I get nervous. Or, you just have a good actor takes that nervousness and focuses on your craft and allows it. And then, and go through it. That's what we do.
And has Netflix approached you like, hey, we'd love to talk to you about other Netflix projects at some point? Because I know that you see actors and directors that are doing projects for Netflix like over and over and over again.
Well, they're talking about different versions of Virgin River. An earlier, maybe different things have come up, but right now they're so pleased with the show, and we're so happy with the show that we're just focusing on this. And I have other projects as a director and producer that I'm developing on my own, and Netflix would be a lovely place to be. They've been extremely supportive and amazingly receptive to creative input. So it's a great place to work, and it's part of the reason Hollywood is changing like it is now.
Yeah, sure. And what date does the book come out?
The book drops November 12th.
November 12th. It's an awesome book.
Oh, thank you so much.
It's about you, and it's about the history of Hollywood as well. So for people that want that full arc of the history of filmmaking and television, it's really a great book. So
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
congratulations.
Thank
And
you very much.
thank you so much for an awesome interview. I really appreciate it.
You were fabulous. I enjoyed it very much. Thank you. And I love the pictures of your family behind you.
Oh, thank you. You're the only person who ever asked about that, by the way.
Look at that baby. Oh my God. That's
Yeah.
so beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Tim.
Thank you. Thank you, Allison.
You can listen to this entire episode and other interviews of mine by going to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and downloading and subscribing to the Allison Interviews podcast.